The Institute for Faith and Freedom at Grove City College presents Liberty Mail with the Student Fellows of Faith and Freedom.
Welcome back to another episode of Liberty Mail with Aaron Jenks
and Libby Krieger.
And instead of being at the Underground Studio, today we are in sunny Orlando, Florida, waiting to go to CPAC. We are super excited to get going. It's 88 degrees, something
like that.
We do not get in Pennsylvania. So
we're loving Florida.
Oh my gosh.
No masks. It's great.
Mm-hmm. And we're going to have a lot of material coming out for you guys. New stuff on the YouTube channel. Videos from CPAC, new kind of like data sets we're going to come out with. We're really excited about everything we're going to get from this whole weekend.
Yeah, and we'll have another podcast at some point coming up in the next few days, in the next week, about kind of our analysis on CPAC too. So what we learned there and what we're seeing from the conservative movement writ large. So we're really excited about that. But to jump into win number one, we have the Freedom Convoy, which I'm sure many of you have been watching. It's been developing in the past week or two, and Justin Trudeau, so Canadian Prime Minister, just rescinded the emergency orders, which, Aaron, I know you have some more on that too.
Yeah, so he announced on Wednesday. He announced on Wednesday that they're rescinding or revoking the emergency powers, which he invoked earlier in the month.
Against the truckers.
Correct. And so I know we talked about the truckers a couple times, but in this time, it's a win in itself that Trudeau kind of stepped back from public pressure. And then, which was crazy, I think the thing that led to this public pressure is that you had people from across the aisle in America. So it wasn't just the right kind of, and Trudeau was kind of characterizing the Freedom Truckers as a right-wing movement.
Mm-hmm. Didn't he? I believe he might have called them terrorists or domestic terrorists.
Called them a lot of things, and it was.
If that's wrong, then I'll
eat your words, but
I shouldn't have said that without fact checking it first.
That's
but
okay. The rational, kind of intellectually honest, whether liberal, conservative, understood that this was not a movement centered in any aisle. Mm-hmm. And so my favorite comment was coming out of the news story that a journalist was,
was reporting on a local shop owner.
Yeah.
And that local shop owner, because of the reporting, so this shop owner donated $250 to the Freedom Convoy truckers. Mm-hmm. And because of this story that was written on her, she received threats and had to close her shop. And the really remarkable thing is Representative Ilhan Omar,
coming from across the aisle.
Yeah, one of the squad, very progressive members of Congress, actually took a stand against this. And not only did she just disagree with it, she came out publicly. And so credit where credit is due, like you've mentioned before. She said how it was just unnecessary to ruin this woman's livelihood.
Her tweet read, "I fail to see why any journalist felt the need to report on a shop owner making such an insignificant donation." And then she goes on to say, "Everybody has the right to critique your own story and to its own merits." And she said, "You're entitled to your own opinions, but my opinion remains the same. These kind of stories ruin people's lives and are uncalled for."
And I know she even went on further to say how the reporting often has a political bias in it too. So
yeah, absolutely.
I thought that was notable that she called that out.
Mm-hmm. It makes me happy, and it's like a refreshing kind of story that you can see this, because so often I think, and this is like kind of what definitely at Liberty Mail, what we are against and what we kind of try to like, while we promote our narrative, we're trying to work against the narrative within politics and government that's, okay, I'm on the left, I'm only going to support and praise anything my side does, even if it's negative, or I'm on the right, my side does something horrible, but I have to stand with them.
Yeah.
And so just seeing political actors step out of kind of that restricting
this us versus them mentality. Yeah, I think it's showing the intellectual honesty there. And I said it before that this is probably the first and last time I may ever agree with Rep. Omar, but I'll give it to her this time.
Well, we appreciate you, Congresswoman Ilhan Omar,
on
this
that.
one matter.
Yeah, on this one matter, we'll asterisk that. Sorry, you go ahead.
No, go, 'cause I was going to hop on to the next.
Okay, yeah. So, well, kind of on this topic, I thought it was funny that, or interesting that Franklin Graham, so he's an American evangelist, he called them the truckers, modern day Paul Revere's. So I thought that was good that he was taking a stand on that. And speaking of Franklin Graham, recently in the news, so with everything that's been happening with Ukraine and Russia, we're not going to get into that, but he tweeted the other day, And he got a lot of flack for it. Let me pull it up. He said, "Pray for President Putin today. This may sound like a strange request, but we need to pray that God would work in his heart so that war could be avoided at all cost. May God give wisdom to the leaders involved in these talks and negotiations, as well as those advising them." Perfectly fine tweet. Actually,
but a storm of upset people that he would pray for President Putin. And then in the face that many of the top comments and top critiques to Pastor Graham is that, okay, you don't pray for President Biden right now. Why aren't you calling him out?
Yeah.
And then it took me 3 minutes to just sit on Google.
I saw it. Yeah, I saw him do it.
Franklin Graham prays for Biden.
Yeah.
And it was at least 3 tweets that he sent out just from his Twitter account from the past couple years when it was President-elect Biden, and then another one I found during his presidency, saying, okay, we need to pray that Biden has wisdom, that God delivers him faithfully and does a good steward over America. And so it almost makes me think these people just don't care. And this is kind of the stuff that I was saying, that this is the narrative in politics that we don't like, and we're trying to get away.
Well, number one, even if you read just the first sentence, "Pray for President Putin today," I think we're having a misunderstanding of what it means to be a Christian and pray for others. You're supposed to pray for your enemies too. So
yes, love thy enemy.
even if you're not doing it in the sense of wisdom for him, just to make good decisions for everyone, there's still a sense that even if you disagree, you should be praying for him despite the situation. And same with any other world leader too. I think it's wise that we be praying for their decisions.
Look, it is radical to pray for your enemy, the person you hate the most, to make them your friend, befriend them. And so in our culture, when you have a well-known pastor say this, a good representation of what the Christian faith ought to be. And so I'm happy to see this happen. And we're going to face criticism, which is fine. We're not victims here. We will never, as Christians, take the victim card.
Because we know we have victory in the end.
Exactly. And another critique on my end of this is okay, what is this coming from? Noticeably the left. Is this a form of intolerance? Is this the left kind of refuting freedom of religion, freedom of liberty? Or I like to refer to freedom of religion more as freedom of conscience. Right?
Well, yeah.
You have, in America, people's own ethics, people's way of life, complete ways of life.
At the most basic level, it is.
Yeah, it's their freedom of conscience. And that is reflected in the freedom of religion.
Yeah.
And so if we're going to let the secularists do what they want, and we're going to fight for them to have that right, then we just see, okay, is this intolerance, or do they not want Christians to have this right?
Yeah. What I found the most interesting is that the media stance on this, and how they made this a story, and they went through and looked at these comments and made this into a story, and you just Google it and it's 10 articles about Franklin Graham calls on Americans to pray for Putin. And it's this big thing, when it's an interesting story now for us to see, because it's such an overreaction, and it shows us the misunderstanding of prayer and what it means to be a Christian in our world today. But I just thought that especially was interesting. They look for anything to kind of zero in on and target in that way.
But you know what? When we do this, and when leaders in the Christian faith in America do this, pray for the enemy, honestly, aside from anything, it's very reasonable under my mind. But when we, like I said, when we pray for our enemies, to kind of have God intervene in this world, it's going to be looked upon as, what the heck are you doing? A lot of the times, especially within our culture. And we just have to keep on leading by example and hope that, okay, God is sovereign over this, our lives, and over this country. And so he's going to intervene, and the right things are going to happen in the end. And people don't understand, I think, from a theological point, that, okay, good things might not happen, but
but his will be done.
Exactly.
Yeah. And so my end of the day is we should pray for Putin, we should pray for Biden, we should pray for Governor DeSantis, we should pray for our leaders. And I think it's ridiculous that Franklin Graham got such pushback on this. But
Absolutely. And I had one more point that is okay, if we're thinking about I'm trying to understand why people are upset at this, right? And get down to the base of it. Is it more of we want a clear, distinct separation of church and state. We don't want any religious leaders kind of interfering within politics, or like and upset as them getting into politics, into that realm. And that understanding would make sense to me if you're a very rigid understanding of separation of church and state, but I think our founding fathers and many conservatives have an understanding that it's separation, but it's not too distinct. You still have public life is involved with the religious aspect of faith. The only thing that is distinctive is that the church is not ruled by the state, and the state is not ruled by the church.
Yeah, I think that could definitely be part of it. Another thing that I see is just everything has become political. So it can't just be a pastor taking a stance on, or not even taking a stance, telling Christians to pray. That is now being something that can't just be Christian. It's Republican or Democrat. It's liberal or conservative. And I mean, you're seeing that with how we saw corporations during 2020 and beyond. Now everyone is having to take a stand on everything. And you can't just have normal life anymore. It's just like politics is everywhere. So like the personal has become the political. And I think it's a combination of those factors too, but that's kind of why we're at where we are. With this.
And part of me is like, okay, fine. If that's where you want to lead the culture, that's perfectly fine. But then don't call out Christian leaders, and don't try to make it not okay for Christian leaders to do the same thing in their own ways. That's where the freedom of conscience comes from, and the freedom of further back to freedom of religion, I think.
Yeah, well, kind of moving that was kind of 1 and 2 wins together, almost all combined. And so our third win of this week is actually coming up here at CPAC. So obviously so many exciting speakers to tune into, but we're also seeing Tulsi Gabbard is speaking at CPAC, and she is by no means a typical conservative. She's not a Republican. So I think it's good to see that we're not just strictly by party, but conservatism and this space for the conservative movement is welcoming people who wouldn't typically agree with us on everything.
Yeah, I mean, okay, so she was a Democrat as a congresswoman, but then I would think more now she's at least been pushed more to the center, if not to the right. And I was wondering earlier, okay, is this one of those cases where it's a repeat of kind of a Reagan quote, is I didn't leave the Democratic Party left me.
Yeah.
And so
I think that's exactly right.
moderate Democrats are having this feeling that, okay, why the party is drifting more to this side, what am I going to do, and how am I going to deal with this reality? Are they going to be pushed to the Republican Party? And so Tulsi Gabbard, at least just speaking at a conservative event, understanding that she shares a lot of opinions and thoughts that fellow conservatives do.
And certainly there's a lot of ways in which she's divorced from conservatism.
Absolutely, yeah.
But I think it shows, again, like we said before, some level of intellectual honesty, which I really admire her for, because obviously her party is going to be up in arms that she's speaking at the largest, or one of the largest conservative gatherings, CPAC. So I think that's really exciting that she's kind of branching off just from being a Democrat, but instead of just being someone who believes what she believes and speaking on it. And this is not, by her speaking at CPAC, a pledge of allegiance or anything of that sort to conservatism, to the movement, or to the Republican Party by any means. But I still think it's a win writ large.
It's commendable on her end, because for myself and what I hope that a lot of Americans want for politics within this country is we want our leaders to work across the aisle. We want our leaders to not play this partisan divide within our government. We want them to go to conservative events, go to the Democratic events or liberal events, and understand each other's arguments. Don't shut people out. We're going to have debates and understandings and come to an agreement.
Yeah. Well, also because most of America isn't just really far right or really far left. Like a lot of people are just what they would consider reasonable, and they see merits to both sides in some areas. But I think a lot of Americans can resonate with someone like Tulsi Gabbard, who can switch sides on different issues.
It's what good, strong leaders do. They do not bind themselves to an ideological kind of like box. It's okay, I can admit that I was wrong on this issue. Maybe the right was correct on this issue, or the left is right on this issue.
Yeah, and there's certainly a balance, because especially I think as conservatives, we're under a lot harder of an attack than the left is. So sometimes you have to kind of try to find that balance of, yes, calling out your own side, but not friendly firing so much because you already know the left is going so hard on conservatives. So I do think there is a balance, but it's easier for someone like Tulsi, who is on the left and not already getting quite as much of that bear attack from that conservative skit, to do that, but still very commendable.
Yes, now we have two Democratic leaders that have taken a stance kind of against their party lines, or the first one not so much, but at least being commendable to have civility to be like, okay, I'm gonna speak up for
honesty.
Exactly, speak up for what I believe in, and I'm not
admirable.
gonna be binded and held back by my party lines.
Yeah, so I think those are 3 great wins for the week. And speaking of CPAC, we'll have some more analysis on that after we see some more speakers this next weekend or this coming weekend. So thank you all for tuning in. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure you subscribe to the channel, hit the bell somewhere below where Aaron's sitting.
Boom, boom.
And then if you're watching on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, make sure to share with your friends. We'll see you here soon.
Thanks, y'all.
Bye.
For more information on this podcast or other programs, please visit faithandfreedom.com.